very excited. We're starting a new series today. Today we're starting our series on unlikely heroes, and we are starting first of all with Joseph. Now you might be familiar with the story of Joseph. You think, well, I already know a lot about this. But what we're going to do, we're going to put ourselves in Joseph's shoes and really try to think what he was thinking as he was going throughout his life, and I think that'll help us understand the theme that we're going to go to today. And so the title for our message today is The Story of Joseph and How God Works All Things Out for Good. Now, speaking of God working all things out for good, have you ever heard the phrase, life gives you lemons, what do? Make lemonade. What's the idea behind that? Yeah, even if something bad comes about, you can try to make something good out of it. So we're going to talk about how God can take any circumstance and turn it into good. So turn with me to Genesis chapter 37. Genesis 37. And to give you some context on Joseph, this passage is going to, first of all, talk about Jacob. And Jacob is the grandson of Abraham. Now, Abraham's a key figure in the Old Testament because God came to Abraham and said, I'm going to give you a land, and I'm going to give you a son, and he's going to turn into a great nation. So Jacob is Abraham's grandson. And does anybody know what name God gave Jacob later in his life? Israel. Now, that's a pretty important name, right? And so Israel is going to turn into a nation. So here's Jacob, and in verse 1 of chapter 37, look with me, it says, Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojourning in the land of Canaan. And so Jacob had many children, and one of his children is Joseph. Now, what was Jacob's relationship with Joseph? Look at verse 3. It says, Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully with him. Now, as a parent, you know you're not supposed to have a favorite child. And even if you do, you don't go tell all the other children which one is your favorite. And then on top of that, you don't give that one child that's your favorite a special, unique thing and not give any of your other kids something special. Kind of like if you give your child, this car, and you're like, he's my favorite, and then you give none of your other children anything. And let me go back and say the point we're going to make here. We're first of all talking about Joseph's weakness, and first of all we're going to see his arrogance and lack of judgment. So here the father says, you're my favorite, and then look at verse 5. Let's talk about Joseph and some of his weaknesses here. Verse 5 says, Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, an eye sheaf arose and stood upright. And binding stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. His brother said unto him, Are you indeed going to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the sayings in mind. So what happens here is Joseph has two dreams saying that his brothers and his family are going to one day bow before him. Now, it's not Joseph's fault. He had these dreams. There's nothing he could do about it. What was not smart is what he did once he had these dreams. So here we have Joseph, who's the favorite, and multiple times already it's been told us that his brothers hate him for that. So Joseph goes and tells these brothers who hate him, oh, my dreams say that I'm better than you and you're going to bow before me. So we don't know exactly what Joseph's motivations was here, but he was probably proud, saying, look at me, look what I'm going to have in the future, or just really naive, lack of judgment. Kind of like if you're a Broncos fan and you go to a Raiders game, you don't go dressed like this and being crazy and acting cheering for the Broncos, because the Raiders will kill you, right? So you just don't do that. So for Joseph to go and tell his brothers this was just not smart and probably even a little bit proud. So we see that Joseph has some weaknesses before we see some of his strengths. So because this happened, we're now going to see the downward spiraling of Joseph's circumstances. First of all, we're going to see Joseph is sold by his brothers. Things are going to get real bad real quick for Joseph. So look with me at chapter 37, verse 23. It says, "And it came to pass when Joseph was come unto his brethren, they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And they took him and cast him into a pit. And the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said to his brethren, What profit is it that if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content. Then they were passed by the Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, and the captain of the guard." So what's happening here is Joseph's brothers hated him so much to the point that they weren't okay with just hating him on the inside or talking about him behind his back. They said, no, we want him out of our life for good, so let's kill him. That's how much they hated him. But then the brother said, you know what, if we kill him, that doesn't give us as much benefit as if we sell him into slavery, because not only do we get rid of him, we get money. So Joseph gets sold into slavery. Now, put yourself in Joseph's shoes. Would you be a little hurt and confused by your brothers selling you into slavery? And we don't know exactly how old Joseph is here, but scholars estimate around 17. So to go and live anywhere without your family at age 17, that's a scary thing. But then to know you're being sold into slavery at 17, which means you're going to a place you don't know. You're going to a place where no one cares about you. You're going to a place where it is legal for them to work you to death. That'd be a little frightening, right? That's the kind of emotions that Joseph is going through right now. It would be very easy in Joseph's shoes to be like, what are you doing? Why on earth would you allow this to happen? We don't know exactly how Joseph responded to this, but that would definitely be an easy way to respond. So next, we're going to see in the his events spiraling down, we're next going to see Joseph falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. So look with me at chapter 39. Chapter 39. Verse 1 says, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of a guard, an Egyptian, brought him out of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and made him an overseer of his house, and all that he had put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not what he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So at this point, things are looking a little up for Joseph, because he's sold to this man named Potiphar, the captain of the guards for the Pharaoh. And Potiphar sees that God is blessing Joseph in what he does. So because of that, he makes him in control of all his household. So it's kind of like Joseph went from being the fry cook at McDonald's to being the manager. So it's getting a little better. He's getting promoted even though he's a slave. But then this happens. Look at verse 7. It says, "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, Lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house. He committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in the house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I go this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, to be with her. And it came to pass about that time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there were none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto mock us. And he came unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when I heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her, until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came unto me, and to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted my voice and cried, then he left his garment with me, and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant unto me, that his wrath was kindled. So stop there. So when Joseph, finally things are looking a little better for Joseph, Potiphar's wife makes a false accusation against him, and now Potiphar is really mad at him. And so next we're going to see in Joseph's downward spiral of the circumstance, Joseph is thrown into prison. So look at verse 20 and look what Potiphar does. It says, And Joseph's master took him and put into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Now we don't know exactly what this prison was like, but think about it. So here Potiphar is over the prison, and this man evidently did something with his wife. And so he was very angry at him, and now here's a slave in a prison. So we're expecting that his accommodations were not like this. Evidently that's a prison somewhere in the world. We looked at the 10 nicest prisons in the world. So I wouldn't mind staying there. But the idea is that Joseph probably is in this horrible conditions. And once again, if you're in Joseph's shoes, you might be thinking, what's going on? Now I'm in prison, I didn't even do anything, and I'm in prison. God, why are you allowing this to happen? Well, now we're going to see Joseph's turn of events, which is chapter 41 through 46. So first of all, we see Joseph rises to power, 41 through 37. So turn to chapter 41. While you're turning there, let me tell you something that happens before this chapter. So Joseph is in prison, and while he's in there, certain inmates, other people that are in prison, have these strange dreams. And God gives Joseph the ability to interpret these dreams correctly. And so one of these people that gets out of prison tells Pharaoh that, hey, this guy interpreted my dreams and they came to pass. And so Pharaoh has a dream that he doesn't know how to interpret. He keeps on having the dream over and over and over again. So he remembers that Joseph can do this. He gets Joseph out of prison, and then he has Joseph interpret his dream, and Joseph does that correctly. And so because of that, Pharaoh is very impressed and makes him one of his servants. Now knowing that, look at chapter 41 and in verse 37. 41 verse 37. It says, "And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants," talking about Joseph. "And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house. According unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. And only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, Bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt." So this is a crazy turn of events. So Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph that he says, you know what, I'm going to make you second in command over all of Egypt. Let's remember that Egypt at this point in time wasn't just some backwater country. This was the powerhouse nation of the world at this time. And Joseph went from being a slave to a slave prisoner to now being second in command over all of Egypt. It's kind of like if you were a prisoner of war in a nation and you went from being back to being the vice president of that nation. That's a crazy turn of events. Now, what does Joseph do with this power? Well, the last one we're going to see is Joseph saves his family, chapter 42 to 46. Now, we're not going to read all of that. It's a very long account. You can do that after this if you want. So we're just going to summarize what happens there. So what happens is God gives Joseph the wisdom to store up food just in case a famine comes. And sure enough, the famine does come, and it's so bad that without this food, all of Egypt would have starved and died, and all of the surrounding area as well. So what happens is Joseph's brothers, his families who had betrayed him, said, you know what, we're starving to death. I hear Egypt has a store of food. So they go to Egypt to ask for food, to pay for food. And so they go, and who do they go before to ask for food? Joseph. But they don't recognize Joseph, but Joseph recognizes them. So put yourselves in Joseph's shoes again. Here are the brothers that sold you into slavery, and if you want, you could snap their fingers, they could all be killed, and no one would say anything different. You're second in command of Egypt. But God gives Joseph love and forgiveness. And what does Joseph do? He loves and forgives his brothers. He doesn't kill them. He ends up giving them food and saving his family's life by doing that. So, in conclusion, let's first of all think about the theme of our series. The title of our series is Unlikely Heroes, talking about how people that are normal, messed up people, God does great things with. So, think about Joseph. So, at the beginning of his life, Joseph was spoiled, most likely proud and naive. So Joseph wasn't perfect, but God used him to do some amazing things. Joseph ran Potiphar's house. He helped people in jail. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream. He even ran the whole Egyptian government, saving all of Egypt and his family. The point is, Joseph wasn't this just amazing guy. God is amazing. And he can do amazing things through ordinary people. And the same goes through with our life. Whatever God is calling you to do, he will give you the grace to do it. Now, something we all struggle with, we don't like stepping out of our comfort zone. That's natural. We don't like doing that. Kind of like a child jumping off the diving board for the first time. That's a little scary, so sometimes they need a little nudge, right? See if you got your, not to comfortable. Well, stepping out of our comfort zone to do something can be very scary. It could be something like, even I talked about this in Sunday school, sharing the gospel with someone. Whether it be a coworker, a family member, a friend, a neighbor. That's not comfortable to share with someone that you're a sinner that can't go to heaven on your own. That's hard to do. But God, in His power, can help us do that. Or it could just be a task that we know that is coming up, and we're thinking, how on earth am I going to do this? And I've never done anything like that before. I can't accomplish this. You have a big God that has been doing big things through ordinary, messed up people all the time, throughout all of history, can do that same thing in you. Trust that your God is big enough to help you accomplish this, to step out of your comfort zone. And then another thing we're doing in this series is highlighting specific characteristics of God displayed through these characters' lives. It's like we talked about in the title, we're showing how God can work all things out for good. And as we put ourselves in Joseph's shoes, when we're thinking about being sold into slavery, being thrown into prison, it'd be very easy to say, do you not love me? Are you not in control? What is going on here? But think about it this way. God used all those circumstances for good. They were based on people sinning, his brothers being hateful, Potiphar's wife being evil, and wanting something she couldn't have. But God turned those circumstances into good. Because through Joseph being sold to Egypt, he was then able to rise to power and not only save Egypt from the famine, but his own family. Joseph's own family, including Joseph, all would have died with this famine coming up. But God, in His good judgment, worked this situation so that Joseph could help save all these people. And then even going into prison. You think, why would God allow him to go into prison? Well, if he had not gone into prison, then Pharaoh wouldn't have heard about Joseph interpreting dreams, and so he wouldn't have come before him and made him go into second in power overall. None of this would have happened if God had not worked all these circumstances out. So when it comes to our life, there might be things that happen, and we're thinking, why are you allowing this to happen? Do you not love me? Are you not in control? This doesn't make sense. But we have to remember that God